Section 5, Likkutei Sichot, Volume 1, Parshas Noach, and we're in the second Sicha, and we talked about the fact that spiritual matters should not get in the way, even spiritual matters should not get in the way of doing mitzvot. So we talked about the importance of mitzvot yesterday, and I gave this whole story about this researcher friend of mine that's a very special academic who realized that the Rebbe's main gift to Yiddishkeit was orthodoxy. And orthodoxy literally means seeing mitzvos as the central spinal column of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism. Let's get further into this. What is the... So I said yesterday that he's now going to give us a remedy for dealing with these troubling thoughts, worries, or whatever angst that you get from all these even spiritual things that you have to do, like communal work. So we know from the Ba'al Shem Tov and his new interpretation of Noach's prophecy that Hashem said to him, come to the ark. And we know that come into the ark from the waters of the flood. Again, we said that the two types of waters. The waters coming from the abyss, from below, and even the waters coming from above, the rain, which symbolize the spiritual worries that a person has. So the remedy for both is to come into the ark. And the ark in Hebrew also means Tevot Torah ve'atfilah, the words of Torah and davening. So it's very interesting that the Rebbe adds the words Torah, because in the Ba'al Shem Tov usually explained, not usually, I think exclusively, explained that it means prayer. And the Rebbe adds here, I think he's adding, I've never seen a source, which doesn't mean anything because I haven't seen very many things, but I haven't seen a source, it's not in Amud Tfilah, in the Ba'al Shem Tov on the Torah, that says that the Ba'al Shem Tov also meant the words of Torah. But it could be mistaken. Bo la teva. What does it mean for a person to come into the words? Al adam lavo el toch otiyot haTorah ve'atfilah liot mukaf behem. ואז קיים הביטחון שנערות לא ישטפוה ונוח איש צדיק ובני ביתו יישארו בשלמותם. So he says, when you take refuge in these words of prayer and Torah, then you can weather the storm of the flood. You can be confident that you will not be sunk, you won't be drowned. It gives you confidence, basically. I think I told you last year already that I had this chiddush. It suddenly hit me, not a chiddush, it suddenly hit me. What is the Ba'al Shem Tov saying? The Ba'al Shem Tov is saying that Noach could have interpreted his prophecy in two different ways. The pshat, which is the physical, which is you need to build an ark and use the ark to get through the flood. Or the more spiritual interpretation, which is the Ba'al Shem Tov's interpretation, which is also sustained by the words. The words carry this meaning also, which is to pray. And we know that the sages say that Noach's mistake, and why he's only a ish tzaddik tamim bedorotav, why he's only in his generation is considered to be righteous, but if he was in some other generation which was better, he would not be considered righteous, is that he didn't pray for the people of his generation. He didn't take responsibility for what he sees around him.
Could it not have meant both? Maybe he was supposed to do both.
Yeah, I'm saying he missed.
Or he was supposed to just never build anything.
So what I initially thought was that if he would have prayed, he wouldn't have needed the other interpretation. And this is true about every prophecy. Every prophecy, you can understand it in numerous ways. If you're able to understand it in the best possible way and to act on that possible interpretation, then the other worse interpretations fall apart. You don't need them anymore. You don't need to do them. So it could be that he wouldn't have needed to build an ark because he had already prayed for the people's generation, would have cared about them, he would have changed them, he would have gone to great lengths to change them. Now, what does it mean? I'm not sure if we should talk about this today or we should save it for later, because I hinted to it on the first day. I said that there's a whole issue here with the ark that's connected to what the Rambam calls that the imagination cannot imagine a metal ship running through the air.
The Rambam actually writes that.
Yeah, he writes this in the Moreh Nevuchim.
A metal ship in the air?
Yeah, you can't imagine that. Why? Because it doesn't work. Now that's strange. Why is that? Well, he didn't know about propulsion. Right? He couldn't. That I don't find strange. That he couldn't yet imagine a propulsion system because there was no steam. There were no steam engines in his time even. Although there were steam engines in ancient Greece, they didn't know what to do with them, and they sort of were forgotten. We found models. There have been models found of toy cars, basically, in ancient Greece. They worked on steam, or at least we think they worked on steam, and nobody ever made the leap, or nobody ever thought about, okay, so how do you take this and make it bigger, and you could actually take people different places. So the Rambam couldn't think about propulsion. The only type of flight that they saw was bird flight. And it's called lighter than air flight, usually.
No balloons?
There were no hot air balloons. And that's also lighter than air. So butterflies and insects and all these types of animals, they're lighter than air they're lighter than air flight. And birds are heavier than air. But they couldn't tell the difference. So the moment you say that the bird is heavier than air, it doesn't matter if the bird's made out of feathers or it's made out of metal. It doesn't matter anymore. There is a way now. What we're supposed to do scientifically is to understand that there is some method by which something that is heavier than air, and he took metal being the extreme, but something that would be heavier than air, that could fly through the air. It could get lift. Now what he was missing was Noach's Ark. If he would have, hey, how are you? So we need to bring you a chair. Okay. Oh, you can get one. Great. So what I think the Rambam missed was that even to make, like, what was Hashem teaching him? Why is this connected to prayer? Why am I connecting this to prayer? I'm not sure if I do this today or the day after. But what was Hashem teaching Noach when he told him, make an ark and put animals in it? First of all, everybody has this problem with, how do you fit all the animals in the world on an ark? You can't. So Rashi already took care of that. Rashi tells us, the only animals that went aboard are the animals that did not destroy their species, meaning that they did not have interspecies relations. That's a very small subset, apparently, of all the animal life in the world. That's already the sages say. You don't have to fit all the animals on the ark. That's not the issue.
Count the number of species that are today.
No, so
they all come from Noah's Ark originally. That's a lot.
So that's what people think. But the other option is,
you couldn't get the Bronx Zoo inside the
the other option is that speciation is much, much faster than we think it is.
But there's a simpler explanation, which was that Noah's Ark is the aim of
So that's not simpler. That's
no, it's very simple. And just like in the basic Mikdash, the culture, the Orana Kodesh fitted even it was Lo Mimida. So the same thing is in Noah's Ark.
So certainly not the pshat. It's some kind of a spiritual explanation. I have nothing against it, but it's not the pshat. In the pshat, what Rashi said, why does Rashi say that? Because he knows you can't fit.
Quantum positioning.
You can't fit all the animals in the world on an ark that size.
For one floor for 8 people.
Who knows? Maybe they're big people. I don't know. They had very good living conditions, or that floor was actually
Also
partially for the people. There was other things in it. Food, and where was the food stored? Right, the trash, we know where it was stored. Where was the food itself stored? Anyway, so getting back to this, what was Hashem teaching him by making an ark that would fit a lot of animals? You still have to imagine that this was the biggest ship ever created. So in the same way that the Greeks had a small steam engine, but they didn't know how to increase, what do you call it? When you make it bigger, scale it into something. But they couldn't scale it to something bigger. So it could be that there were boats, but nobody could imagine a boat that big. How would that thing float? The point is that if you understand how a boat floats, the principle, then you can understand how to fly through the air. the thing that the Rambam missed. Why? Because what causes the boat, you can make a boat out of metal, doesn't matter. What causes the boat to float? Well, that the water that's touching the boat is causing lift. It has resistance. Now the air, you know that air is not nothing. It's just very thin nothing. It's just very thin material, but it's still material. So all you have to imagine is that in the same way that every point of water causes lift on the boat, every point of air causes lift on any surface that you put under it, or over it rather. That's the principle of flight. Again, the principle is not the aerodynamics. That you figure out later. This is how it actually works. But the principle is that any point that you take, whatever you take, every point has reality. It's something. It's material, and it pushes against. It's present. It's not empty. Space, meaning air, is not an empty vacuum. It's something, and you know it is something because you feel air. Here, I feel it right now. The only problem is that you can't imagine that every point is full of something. What's that? That is called the principle of Hashra'ah in Chassidus. Hashra'ah means that God is omnipresent. That's the principle that's underneath all of this. Both boats and flight. That God is present, air is present, water is present anywhere that you go. If you're going into the ocean, you have water underneath you wherever you are. If you're going into the into the skies, into the air, you have air underneath you wherever you are. Except when you have turbulence, which means that there was a pocket of less air. But there's still air there because you don't fall all the way down to the ground. This is the principle of what we call Hashra'ah, which is the highest principle of Jewish thought, that Hashem is everywhere. You need that principle in order to pray. That's basically where this is going. You don't understand how to pray until you understand. Like if somebody would, what was the principle back before prayer? The principle before prayer was that you went to a temple, and people assumed that there was a special quality to this place. Why? Because it was a stone that fell from heaven, or I don't know what, whatever they imagined. And this place has special powers. But they couldn't imagine what Avram said, which is that Hashem is Kel Olam. He and the world are not two separate things, they're one thing. So wherever in the world you go, Hashem is there. That's Hashra'ah. That's exactly what omnipresence means. Sometimes they call it the all-present. HaKadosh Hu Mekomo Shel Olam. That God is the place, He's the space in which the universe exists. And so He's everywhere. So the principle of prayer comes and says, you don't have to go to some holy site. You don't have to go to the Temple Mount to pray. The reason we have the Temple Mount is completely different. Because of Itlabshut, not because of Hashra'ah. Because apart from the fact that Hashem is everywhere, so there is also something called engarment. There is also something called enclothement. But that's a different principle altogether. So, says the Rebbe, לפיכך סדר היום הוא שמיד בקום האדם משנתו טרם ייכנסו לעסקי העולם למים הזידונים אומר הוא מודה אני לפניך שהחזרת בי נשמתי. It says the way that you guard yourself from falling down because you feel there's too much pressure is that you first of all feel that you're before Hashem. The first thing you do when you wake up is you say modeh ani before you get into the business of the world, because the business of the world is not omnipresence. The business of the world, the way that you treat the world is you don't say, oh, God is here equally in everything. I'd like to have your wallet, please. It's equal. It's all the same. You can't say that. The world doesn't work that way. The world works by what we call ishtalshalut, by itlapshut, by evolution, by enclothement and garment. It doesn't work by omnipresence. But when you wake up and you say, and how can it be? I haven't done anything. I'm still in bed. How can I say I thank you, Hashem? Well, how do I? But this is a principle that modern man already understands. Most religious people, from Judaism and on, understand that you don't need to go to a temple. It's right in front of you, where you are. In this place where you are, Hashem is. He's lifting you here. This is what it means to go into the ark. That you have a belief that the waters can sustain me, that the reality can sustain me. I'm not going to drown here. There's something holding me up. So he says, I thank you, Hashem, for giving me back my soul. So he says, even though my soul is limited to this body, but it's being lifted up everywhere I am by Hashem. אחר כך הוא מברך ברכות השחר, מודה לקדוש ברוך הוא על כל פרט ופרט, מלביש עורמים וכולו. לכאורה הרי מצוי לו בגד ללבוש ולשם מה? איפה באה ברכת מלביש עורמים וכן בשאר הברכות? So he says, and afterwards he gives all the thanks for all the details that he has. And he says, Hashem clothed the naked, one of the blessings. What the Rebbe says, he already has it's sitting on the chair right next to me. Why am I thanking Hashem for something that I already have?
Because He gave it to you.
Yeah, that's not what the blessing says. The blessing says, thank you for the clothing, but I have the clothing. Malbish in the future, for giving me clothing, but I already have the clothing. What are you talking about? So now the Rebbe gives a tremendous explanation of what omnipresence causes.
Dressing.
What?
It's thanking for the clothing, not for the clothing.
בסדר.
It's malbish, not malbush.
But still, the understanding here is that, and we'll show another example in a moment, that I'm thanking Hashem as if I don't have this. It's as if it's the first time I've seen clothing. Where did this come from? Oh, I didn't know about this. The true wise man, if you have a sense of omnipresence of Hashem, then you can see things being created at this moment. These two things go together. We talked a little about this last week. But to be able to see, to be able to feel freshness in life all the time, you have to feel that Hashem is omnipresent. That goes together by the Ba'al Shem Tov, omnipresence, hashra'ah, and that God recreates the world at every moment anew. They go hand in hand. They have to go in hand. We saw last week that the Rebbe gave this very interesting argument. It's written in the Tanya, but I never noticed it. That the moment that you say that the world is not eternal, you say that it was created at some moment, you have to also argue that it's recreated at every moment. Why? Because if it was created once, it means it can't sustain itself. It wasn't created with that power to sustain itself, because if it could sustain itself, it would be eternal. It can't sustain itself. So God has to recreate it at every moment. Theoretically, Hashem could give it the power to sustain itself, but then it would be eternal.
Why can't it be replaceable batteries?
So that's exactly what we say. It's replaceable batteries. Every battery lasts for a split second. And Hashem has to replace it every month. Theoretically, so then it's just a question of how fast can you think? Do you think it lasts for a minute? Do you think it lasts for 3 seconds? Do you think it lasts for a split second? How long do you think? How much energy is needed to make this thing run? And that's what Hashem has to input. But now he's saying something more. He's saying that if you want to see the world being recreated, you have to feel that Hashem is everywhere. So what does it mean that Hashem is everywhere? That I feel that everywhere is being sustained. It's not just in general the world is being sustained. In general, I don't know, somewhere out there in the universe, somehow Hashem is holding everything up. This is the problem, again, that the Rambam had. I think that this is the problem that he had. This is how I'm analyzing it. That he couldn't imagine that it's being recreated at every moment in every single spot. Every single spot is holding something up. Hashem is holding everything up, but at every single minuscule. Now, there's a simple proof for this physically. If in time I claim that the world is not eternal, and therefore it has to be sustained at every moment, so that means time is discrete. It means that there's no continuity in time. It only seems to us like there's continuity in time. Where do we see this? We see this with the way that films are made. That you have a successive number of pictures and frames, and you show them quickly. But really, the pictures are discrete. Each one, there's nobody here. Who are you gonna? Oh, you're going to daven somewhere else. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll pick this up tomorrow.
No, because tomorrow's a problem because it's Rosh Chodesh.
Yeah.
And because they can't start davening until 7:30. They used to daven at 7 o'clock. So
Okay.
I make it here in time, and then I have to be in Tel Aviv. To go to Tel Aviv anyway.
So you'll have to come in the afternoon.
Be back at 5, 6 o'clock if you're around.
Yep, I'm around.
I'll give you a call.
Okay.
Good
Good Chodesh. Chodesh Tov to everyone.
Chodesh.
Chodesh Mal Cheshvan.
Bezrat Hashem. Should be